And hello, my Grotzengits. Welcome back to Happy Corrupted Wargaming. We have an awesome one for you today, as we are continuing down the path of learning how to master the new Orc Codex. Today, we're going to talk about the Green Tide. And great ladies and gentlemen, Grotzengits, this is all about the boys, and the boys. Now, if you guys don't know about the detachment rule for Green Tide is, boys, only boys, so it does not apply to beast snags, it only applies to actual boys. They get a 5-up invulnerable save in this detachment. The second part of the detachment rule is if your unit has 10 or more models in it, you get to re-roll save rolls of 1. So effectively, your 20-man boys blobs will have a 5-up invulnerable save, and they will always get to re-roll 1s that on saving throws of 1s, which is pretty cool. Now, a lot of people think this makes the units immortal. Just so you know, re-rolling save rolls of 1s is only something like a 5% increase, but it is an absolute increase in durability. There are some really cool combinations that this can give us that I'm really excited to dive into, so let's do the Green Tide. All right, guys, so here's the deal. When we are playing Green Tide, we have a horde skew. What does that mean? Effectively, what it means is that we are trying to create a stat check army. And we're going to ask our opponents a question, right? I'm going to put 120 boys on the board. And I'm going to look at my opponent. I'm going to say, hello, opponents. Can you kill all of my models before I score all of my points? And your opponent is either going to say yes or no. There's not many armies that are going to be able to confidently say yes. 120 boys is a lot, and it's a lot more when you factor in some of the defensive buffs that we can stack, which we're 100% going to be talking about in this video. So here's the deal about Green Tide. This is probably my least favorite detachment of all the detachments that we have in the Orc Codex. However, that does not mean it's not a good detachment. It is a very good detachment, and I actually believe that there is a lot of play for this, and it's going to really wreck some people's competitive days. So I actually like this detachment a lot, especially in a teams format. I'm not 100% sold on it in a singles format because it's going to have some hard counters just by nature of the skew build that it is. When we're running Green Tide, we're going to see some auto wins. So I'm just going to put my models on the table. I'm going to see my opponent. I'm going to say, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to win this because you just don't have the ability to clear my units. And then I'm going to look at some armies. I'm going to say, crap, I have lost this because you have the ability to clear my units. Now, there's a couple things about Green Tide. The damage output of this detachment is very, 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 very low. So when you're starting to build it, you need to just go ahead and accept the fact that you're not going to be doing much damage, but that's not the purpose of your army, and it's totally okay. One of the weaknesses that we get into list building is when we start trying to build everything into one single list. So if you're trying to take your Green Tide army and you want to make it like super killy, I'm going to slaughter everyone because I'm going to take these megas, I'm going to take this Waz Bomb, I'm going to take this and this and this, I'm going to take these knobs. Well, the problem that you're going to end up running into is that you're trying to focus on killing things so much that your units, your detachment, which doesn't want you to kill things, ends up just being bad at killing things. And then you're also not going to do what your detachment's strength is, which is surviving. So what I recommend is we're going to lean into the horde skew, and we're really going to wreck people with a very, very specific playstyle. Now let's start talking a little bit more in depth. What has the keywords to benefit from this detachment? Well, boys, the boys, and the boys. These things are what benefits. All of your stratagems exclusively apply to boys, and you've got a bunch of infantry characters which are going to love to be attached to those boys. Your enhancements can go on any infantry characters as well, and there's a few that you might actually consider attaching to unit that's not boys, which we'll talk about very, very soon. Let's look at some of the good matchups. I'm just going to talk about some of the good matchups here, and this is going to give you a little bit of insight into how Green Tide is going to run, and we'll go more into detail later in the video. So some of the good matchups, just immediately off the bat. If you run Green Tide into Bully Boys, Green Tide will win. There's just no doubt about it. Green Tide is going to run through Bully Boys simply because you're going to put 120 bodies on the No Man's Land objectives, and all of those bodies have OC too, and the Bully Boys just cannot kill you. They do not have the volume to be able to kill your units. You're going to be regenerating your units. Even if they run a 6-man of Meganobs with Gaz into a squad of 20 boys, there's a high probability they don't kill your squad, and then you're going to regenerate, and you're just going to out-OC those Meganobs so that your opponent just cannot score. So it really is just a very, very brutal thing to do to your opponent because they're never going to have the OC to score primary, even if they can kill most of you and you can't kill them at all. So you'll just beat bully boys simply from the standpoint that they can't kill you. You can't kill them, but you don't care because you're still going to be scoring your points and they will be scoring nothing. Imperial Knights is a very similar thing. Green Tide will not kill Imperial Knights. I think you'll be lucky to kill anything in the Imperial Knights Codex. However, they can't kill you, and you're going to out-OC them, and you're just going to cause lots and lots of problems. Thousand Suns. Well, with that many boys, you're going to be able to pressure forward. They will not clear hordes effectively super, super well. They'll have some ability because they can always like double doom bolt. They'll still be able to focus down a horde pretty well. So it's not like an auto win, but they're going to really, really struggle with the amount of bodies. And then once you get all of your boys into melee with them, you do actually have what it takes to start killing off their rubrics, which can really, really severely start to decrease their killing power. So this is actually going to be one of the better matchups in Thousand Suns. So yeah, there you go. Admech, you just have the pressure to be able to handle them. You have the OC to be able to handle them. You're going to push straight through. Imperial Guard. Once again, you're probably not going to be killing very much. You'll kill guardsmen, of course. You might even start eventually wearing down some of the Bullgrin units, just because all your attacks are damage 1 anyway. But you're not really going to be killing any of the tanks, but you don't care. Your entire purpose is to be sitting on the objective with way more OC than your opponent, and they will not have the horde clearing to run through you because all of your units will always have a 5-up invuln, re-rolling ones. If eventually you'll lose the re-rolling ones thing just because they'll start killing you, but since you're regenerating models using your strats or other abilities, which we're about to talk about, then you're eventually just going to wear them down and you're going to outscore them. Necrons, same problem. Necrons can't kill you. Now, I know what you're saying. If they're taking these 10-man blobs of Immortals with Plasmancers, yes, they will be able to kill you. But that's a very specific Necron build, which we are not seeing live right now. So if Necrons pivot into that build, there'll be a problem. But if they don't pivot into that build, then Orcs are just going to run straight through Canoptic Core. And then there's just a lot of different Space Marines, which are going to seriously struggle just beating down this sheer volume of bodies. Now let's talk about some of these bad matchups. Sisters of Battle. This one might be a little bit controversial. I'd love to hear your opinions in the chat, to be honest with you. But man, a unit of Arcoflagellants is going to run through a unit of boys. That unit is just going to be absolute deleted. Then all they're going to have to do is they're going to run 3 units of Arcoflagellants into 3 units of Orc Boys. The first unit is going to delete a unit of Orc Boys. The second unit, you'll interrupt and you'll kill them, but they're going to fight undeath and kill you. And then the third unit, they're going to kill you. So there you have the ability to easily wipe 3 of your boys units in a turn. And I think Orcs Green Tide is going to want to avoid Sisters of Battle like the plague. There are some Blood Angels builds, which are going to cause massive problems for the Green Tide. Ironstorm, I need to see some of the new Ironstorm lists that are out there, but man, the sheer volume of 3 Gladiator Reapers, that's gonna be tearing through these Orc blobs. And certainly Chaos Knights. Chaos Knights are just gonna run through the Green Tide. They're gonna be forcing you to take battle shocks all over the place. They're gonna be focus firing you down, sustained hits with their Reaper auto chain guns or whatever. It's going to be pretty hard for Green Tide to run into Chaos Knights. But one thing I want you to notice here is Green Tide has a lot more really good matchups than they do bad matchups. Now let's talk about some of these enhancements and how we're going to utilize these in games. So we have Ferocious Show Off. This is a 10-point enhancement that I don't really think is that great, but it's really nice to have available to us. So you're going to get +1 strength to your weapons on the infantry model that you put it on. And if you have 10 or more models in the unit, then you're going to get +3 strength. It's kind of cute. The only thing I can really think of it is if I have 10 points left over, I'm going to put it on a war boss to give him that base strength. What is it? It's going to be base strength 10. So base strength 14 on his power claw, which is cool, right? I don't hate it, but for 10 points, it's like, okay, cool. If I have the 10 points, I'm going to put it in, but I'm never going to build it into my list initially. Then we got Brutal but Cunning. On a 5-up, you gain CP. On a 3-up, if the bearer's unit is 10 or more models, and that is kind of cool. So now it also works if you're in a transport, and it happens in the command phase. So when you start stacking, say, like this enhancement with having Gretchen all over the place, you're pretty much always going to be guaranteed, well, your base, essentially, you can pretty much predict that you will be getting that bonus CP, which really opens up fixed mission play for Green Tide specifically. let me paint you a picture here. You've got 120 boys. You're going to hold all of the objectives. You're going to be cleansing on 2 units because they all have pistols. And you're going to be doing deploy teleport homers in the middle every single turn. It's going to score a lot of points. It is going to score so many points. It's not going to matter that you can't kill anything. Your opponents just won't be able to outscore you. And that is disgusting, especially since you have the ability to generate all your CP. You don't need tactical. It is very, very nice. Bloodthirsty Belligerence. This is actually quite a interesting and good enhancement, which I think I like a lot. You get to reroll advance rolls for the unit, and if you have 10 or more models, you get to reroll charge rolls as well. This can be really, really spicy, especially with, like, say, a weird boy who's teleporting a unit of boys. And then you can stack this with one of our strats, which we'll talk about on the next page, which allows you to add a lot of inches to your charge. That can be very, very nice, being able to teleport 9 inches away from your opponent, reroll the charge roll, but also have the ways to modify the charge roll so it's easier. It is really, really cool, and it can stack with some neat combos for Green Tide. And then lastly, the Raucous Warcaller. This one is the enhancement that kind of enables units that aren't boys to be very decent in Green Tide. So Bearer's unit will always count as having 10 or more models for the purpose of strats and the detachment rule. Now, interesting thing, the reroll save rolls of 1 part of the detachment rule is not locked to boys, although the 5-up invulnerable save is. So what does this mean? Well, perhaps we can put this on like a Warboss and Mega Armor, attach them to some Mega Knobs, and now suddenly our Mega Knobs are going to have a 2-up armor save, and they're going to still have the Feel No Pain in the wall. They're got the invulnerable save in the wall, but they're also getting reroll save rolls of 1. Or you could attach them to a Big Mech and Mega Armor, give him this enhancement. Suddenly you have a 2-up armor save, a 4-up invulnerable save, regenerating 1 per turn, and you get to reroll wound rolls of 1, or saving throws of 1. That actually can be quite interesting to me as far as just a survivability check that is a different type of survivability than what we're seeing in the normal boys. All right, let's start talking about some of these strats. Now, we have the competitive streak. This happens in the fight phase, and it goes on a unit that has not yet been selected to fight. That unit gets to reroll wound rolls of 1, or you get to reroll full wound rerolls if you have 10 or more models in the unit. This is very, very nice. It can absolutely increase the damage output of your boys unit. Now, remember what I said about the entire purpose of this list is just to control objectives and to get secondaries down. It's not actually crumping. It's not killing our opponent. However, competitive streak does increase your damage output in some key areas. I'm basically always going to be trying to use this on the unit that has the Warboss in it, because the Warboss plus your knob with Power Claw, this can absolutely increase your damage output a lot more than what your opponent may be expecting. This can also be quite useful on, I don't know, say a unit of Mega Knobs or some other things as well. Then we have the Bulldozer Brutality. This is one of the cool previewed ones. Effectively what this does is you're going to use it on a unit that's eligible to fight within 3 inches of enemy models. So then all of your models are basically, as long as they're within 3 inches of an enemy model, they're eligible to fight. The only key trick with this is that you must also be in engagement range of said unit. So some people are confusing this a little bit. So engagement range is still 1 inches. These guys are just eligible to fight if they're within 3 inches. That doesn't mean that you count as being engaged with that enemy unit if the unit is 3 inches away from your unit. That doesn't work that way. So the enemy's unit does still have to be in engagement range of your unit, but then your models get a 3-inch, fighting range. And it can be a little bit confusing, but just remember it that way. Then we have bragging rights. This happens in the command phase. You get 2 units of boys within 6 inches of each other, and then both will count as having 10 or more models for the purpose of detachment, strats, enhancements. This does not block, I said block, this does not block your battle shock requirements. So if you're under half strength and your counting is more than 10, you still have to take battle shock. You're just counting as more than 10 for the purpose of your stratagems, enhancements, etc. like that. Now let's look at the other 3 strats. We have Come On Lads. This happens in the command phase. Your boys will resurrect D3 plus 2 models. This is super awesome because what it's going to allow us to do is we're going to be regenerating our boys in the command phase to steal objectives. So let's say it's a close battle. I've been fighting World Eaters. I've got 3 boys who survived the charge of their Corn Berserkers. He's got 5 Corn Berserkers. He out-OCs me a little bit. I'm going to spend 1 CP here. I'm going to regenerate minimum 3 models. I'm going to get a bonus 6 OC on that unit, and I'm going to take the objective and be able to score it. This is one of the things that is really, really enabling the crazy high scoring that we will be seeing from Green Tide. Then we have a Tide of Muscle. What this does, it happens in the charge phase, and it only works on boys because everything only works on boys. you get to add the battle round to the charge roll. This is very, very cool. What it could mean is that you could be one of these sneaky little gits who has a weird boy with a unit of boys hanging out in your backfield most of the game, and then suddenly in round 4, you want to teleport them. They have to end the teleport outside of 9 inches of enemy units, but now you get to add +4 to your charge roll, which means you can have a teleporting 5-inch effectively charge. You can stack that with, say, one of the enhancements from earlier. I believe it was Raucous Warcaller, and then you get to reroll the charge roll as well, which is very, very fascinating. And there's going to be some techniques that we're going to have to develop. There's going to be some skills we're going to have to develop, learning when to use this to increase our charge probability. Then the last one's going to be Go Get 'em. And this is one of the defining strats of Greentide. I'd say the 2 defining strats is going to be Come On Lads, and then this one. It happens in the shooting phase, and it only works on boys. After being selected as a target, you can use this stratagem. When the attacking unit has resolved their attacks, you get to roll 1d6, or you get to move, and you get to move those amount of inches towards the closest enemy units. Now, if you have 10 or more models in your unit, then you get to move flat 6. This is exceptionally powerful. Now, here's the deal. When we're actually reading this stratagem, it reads as if the number of models is calculated after the shooting. It is a little unclear, so that's a great TO question. Do you calculate how many models are in the unit when you use the stratagem, or do you calculate how many models are in the unit after the enemy unit has finished shooting? I'm not entirely sure it's super clear. It's not going to cause too many arguments, but this is just a great question for your TO, your tournament, to really define when you decide how many models you have in your unit for the purposes of the stratagem. I read it as saying you determine the amount of models in your unit after shooting has been resolved. I'm sure other people have arguments for that too, though. Let's talk about some of the characters. And now here's one little piece of advice. I want you to understand that when you're playing Greentide, chances are really high you're giving up Max Assassinate. It's just a thing. It's just going to happen. So I would recommend not caring about it. Be like, cool, I'm giving up Max Assassinate. It's done. I don't worry about it anymore. You're going to have 20 points on Assassinate. It is fine. But it is a little bit tricky because your opponent is going to see how many characters you want. They're going to automatically want to take Max Assassinate, but it's a little bit of a trap because killing a 20-man blob of boys with a 5-up invuln and reroll 1s and potentially a 5-up Theono Pain, if you attach a Pain Boy to it, that is then going to be regenerating D3 plus 2 and once per game, an extra D3 from the Pain Boy. It's not really that easy to chew through that unit. So I would say enemy units that are automatically taking Assassinate against your Greentide sometimes might be falling for a trap. Unless it's, say, maybe like Sisters with all the Arcoflagellants, or perhaps an Iron Storm, because they'll be able to kill you. Other armies might decide not to take Assassinate because even though you might give up maximum, it's not necessarily the easiest freaking thing to do. So let's talk about some of the characters here. War bosses. You're going to take 3, and they're going to be 50% of all the damage your entire army deals. It's just because you punch like a wet noodle in this detachment, but you don't care. It's A-okay. So we're taking the war bosses. You're going to get the +1 to hit. You're going to be getting his extra power claw attack in there. It's just really, really important. Then there's a war boss in Mega Armor and Big Mechs in Mega Armor. Now, in all reality, I think you only take 1 unit of Mega Knobs in Greentide if you take any Mega Knobs. And you're just going to have to decide, do you want them to be led by a war boss in Mega Armor, a Big Mech in Mega Armor, or Gaz? And each one has their own benefits and negatives. The Big Mech in Mega Armor, once again, gives you that super hyper tanky unit that's going to be regenerating models, and it's going to and you're always going to give them the enhancement to allow you to count as having 10 or more models in it, so that the Mega Knobs will get to reroll saving throws of 1. The War Boss in Mega Armor gets to punch a little bit harder. Gaz gets to punch even harder than War Boss in Mega Armor, but he's also a lot more expensive. So those are the 3 questions you need to ask yourself if you want to include Mega Knobs. I think there is a value in doing it. Initially, I'm not going to be running it in Greentide, but I do believe there is value in all of them. Then you got the Big Mech. Now this guy is, man, I just really can't find a good use for the new Big Mech model outside of just being a display piece, because holy crap, I love that model. It's beautiful, it is sick, it's a rock star, and its ability just seems really good, but I just can't find use for it. But in Greentide, having a 20-man blob that can't really be move blocked because they get to move through enemy models is pretty cool. I just gotta be honest with you, I don't think I'm taking it, but perhaps some entrepreneurial young lad out there will figure out how to make it work and will prove us all wrong and make me eat my words. And then lastly, we have the Pain Boy. And if you read in like a bunch of competitive forums and stuff, you're going to have a lot of people arguing about including Pain Boys in Green Tide. Me personally, I'm throwing him in. I'm like, absolutely, give me that Pain Boy. Other people think he's too expensive. I think that's a silly thing to say, because giving that huge blob of Orc Boys a 5-up Fiona Pain on top of the 5-up invulnerable save is a massive boost. Now, it's really mainly a huge boost against damage 1 weaponry, but it still can be useful against damage 2 weaponry. It's great against mortal wounds, because remember what I said earlier, one of the things that, like, say, Thousand Suns can do is they can double Doom Bolt a unit, and they don't care about your invuln. It's just going to go straight through and knock down half your unit with 2 Doom Bolts. But once you have a Pain Boy, you get to skew that damage a lot. And I am a huge fan of including as many Fiona Pains in my armies as possible. If any of you have ever played against my Blood Angels army, you're going to understand that. So I love him. I actually think he's also extremely valuable in the mirror, especially when you consider all the mortal wounds that he has the potential to put out. So I think Pain Boys are awesome. I'm going to be running them in my list, and I'll show you what my list is in a little bit when we get to that part of the video. Now let's just talk about the boys. Here's the biggest deal. I'm going to delete this because that part's kind of irrelevant to this video. But the big difference here is when you take 80 boys versus taking 120 boys, there is a breakpoint, a huge breakpoint. Because there are several armies out there who, while they might not want to, they absolutely can chew through 4 blobs of boys with invulnerable saves and regenerating and stuff. The amount of armies that can actually chew through 120 boys is really, really different. And you got to remember that your 20 boy blob has 40 OC. So even with just 2 of these units left alive, that is a ton of OC that your opponent is really going to struggle to chew through. So my recommendation for most people who are wanting to run Green Tide is I want you to 100% lean into what this detachment does well. And what this detachment does well is flood bodies on the board. So I highly recommend you just go straight for it. Go all out. Do the 120 boys bodies and just stat check the crap out of your opponent. You're going to ask your opponent the question, can you deal with me? And most opponents are going to have to say, nah, which means you're going to win. Is it the most fun way to win? Not to me personally, but people enjoy the game in different ways. So I'm going to say, hey, some people are going to absolutely love it and have a total blast doing it. This is how I think it works the best. Now, there's a few other interesting things that we're going to do in Green Tide that we might not do in some other detachments. So let's talk about buggies here. Snazwagon. Boom Daka Snazwagon. Does it actually have a place in Green Tide? I think it very well may. Because what this guy can do is you can just advance him in front of all of your boy squads, provide that huge aura of -1 to hit. It can cause a significant skew in your opponent's just clearing hordes, right? So if we have, I don't know, like say Gladiator Reapers that are shooting into you, the difference between them hitting on 3s and 4s is actually pretty big when you consider the amount of mortals that they might be putting into the boy squad. So I actually think that can be very, very usable. Now, the problem with the Snazwagon is all the enemy really has to do is kill the Snazwagon first, because it's an aura of -1 to hit for units within 6 inches of it. So you got to get it close to the enemy unit's army, and all they would do is they would just shoot and kill it first, and then they would shoot and kill all of your boys. So I'm not so sure how the Snazwagon is, but a custom Booster Blaster can do something very, very similar, while not having to be so carefully positioned. So I kind of like the custom Booster Blaster, because it could just shoot out those suppressed, I think it's the suppressed keyword, which is going to make your unit, your enemy's unit have a -1 to hit modifier until their next, or until your next shooting phase. So that is very, very powerful. So custom Booster Blasters, I think, have a real place, and potentially Snazwagons as well. Then we have the Meganobs. We've already kind of talked about this. How do we do it? Do we want to run Gazgul to have a critical, like, screw you unit that could just kill someone in our army that struggles to kill someone? It's a real conversation. And as we experiment, we might decide that that is very necessary. However, people are thinking about how amazing his lethal hits aura is on boys. It's not that amazing. Guys, I don't even care if you have 500 attacks that are strength 4, AP 1, damage 1. There's still 500 attacks that are strength 4, or AP 5, I guess, in the WA. Or strength 5, I suppose, not AP 5. That are strength 5, AP 1 in the WA. man, it's just not enough. It's just not enough. I don't think his lethal hits really gives the Green Tide what it needs as far as damage is concerned. So I think it's best, honestly, just to not worry about damage at all and strictly focus on board control. If you do that, you're going to have a total blast. So, but that being said, having a unit of Meganauts still makes a lot of sense because it gives you a different defensive profile for your opponent to have to deal with as well. And I think that can be really, really struggling. In my opinion, I'm probably going to I would run one of these with the War Boss and Mega Armor, or I would run it with the Big Mech and Mega Armor. I probably wouldn't be running Gaz here, at least not for right now. So let's talk about Gretchen. A lot of people are thinking, oh, well, we've got all these boys for hordes. We don't need Gretchen anymore. Au contraire, mon frère. Gretchen are always going to be very, very useful for CP generation, and especially with this list, which is begging to take fixed objectives. It's basically always going to be cleanse and deploy teleporters. Having even more just bodies that are going to be high OC is so darn valuable, because even when your opponent finally chews through all the boys and stuff, they're still gonna have to kill the Gretchen. And while it's not hard to kill the Gretchen while the Gretchen are holding high OC, they're still gonna have to dedicate their very precious anti-infantry shooting into the Gretchen, which is then not going into the boys. It is a big problem for armies. So I think we're definitely gonna be running 3 units of Gretchen in Green Tide as well. Plus, my wife likes the Gretchen the most, so I have to. I'm like obligated now to say Gretchen are the best. So there you go. Now I wanted to show you a really cool positioning trick here. So what I've done is I went on TTS and I just kind of showed you what you can do turn 1 with the boys. So I went ahead and attached a 20-man unit of boys to a weird boy, and I got a war boss here. You don't need the war boss, but he's in here anyway. So turn 1, what I did is I teleported them 9 inches away from this Imperial Guard gun line. Now the Imperial Guard gun line has a decision to make. Let's say I roll the charge and I fail the charge. Now the Imperial Guard gun line has a very, very critical decision to make. Do they move more than 3 inches forward? Now, this is for those of you who are still with me, this is going to be a question that your opponent's always going to have to ask themselves. Because if they shoot your unit and they don't wipe your unit, and your unit is still counting as more than 10 models, you're going to move forward 6 inches and you're going to engage them. Because the stratagem for the Orks allows you to engage your opponent. And the second you engage them, other units can no longer shoot you. Now, of course, these are all tanks that would have big guns never tire, so maybe they could, but you don't have to tag every single tank. And once you do that, your opponent can't move any further at all. So they're going to have to move effectively only 3 inches, or actually even a little bit, only about 3 inches. Because if they move, no, they actually got to move less than 3 inches. It would be like 2 inches, right? Because if they're 9 inches away, they move 6. Yeah, that's going to be a problem for them. It's going to be a really, really big problem for them. You can move block so hard with this, and you can really just win a game turn 1. Now, of course, there's a counter to this, and that would be your opponent is going to have scouts. They're going to have infiltrators, which are going to screw up where you're able to teleport. Just like every single good tactic has a counter. But in the case where sometimes your opponent doesn't have the scouting or have the infiltrator screw this up, a turn 1 teleport here can just basically win the game, because it's going to effectively mean that your opponent is never going to leave their deployment zone. And that is a problem for them. So now let's talk about an army list. Here's a army list that I've come up with, and I really think I've run it a few times now, so it is pretty spicy. And there's a few ways that you can do it to make it a little bit different. But I'm going to have you start with this. So I'm going to start with 3 Pain Boys. I love the Pain Boys simply because they increase the durability of our units. They turbocharge it. And the entire purpose of our army is not to kill the enemy, but to not die until we've already scored all of our points. So with Green Tide, we want to score maximum primary, we want to score basically maximum secondary, and we want to deny our opponent primary for as long as freaking possible. And that's what this list really does very, very well. 3 of the units of boys are going to be led by Pain Boys, and these are going to be the first lines that are just going to be hanging out on the objective saying, no, sir, you shall not pass, you will not score here, I will hold this, even if you kill me, you're still not going to score it because I've got another 20 boys behind me that are going to be out OCing you. I'm then going to have 3 war bosses. These 3 war bosses are all going to have the power claws because it's just a little threat that is going to be dramatically increasing the damage output of our units. So I think 1 war boss is going to increase the damage output of a mob by like 30% just from his damage 2 and his +1 buff that he hangs out. So I think we definitely want the war bosses. They're really, really strong. I would, weirdly enough, be interested in seeing what I can build without the war bosses, but for right now, I'm leaving the war bosses in. And one of them is going to have the ferocious show off for the plus for the extra strength, simply because I had points for it. It's not something that I would work in normally. It's just, it turned out that I had the 10 points, so screw it. I'm going to take it. Then I'm going to run one weird boy. Now, this is something that people are probably going to argue about a little bit. Do you take one weird boy? Do you take 3 weird boys? I'm starting with just one, simply because the weird boy's ability is sadly written. You can only attempt his ability with one model. We all wish that you could, like, say if you rolled a 1 on one weird boy, then you could use it on the other one. It just does not happen that way. Once per turn at the end of your movement phase, one weird boy from your army can use this ability. If it does, roll 1d6 on 1. That weird boy's unit suffers d6 mortals. So if you roll that 1, you don't get a second try. So I'm only going to run one weird boy right now. And he's going to be going with the 20 mana blob of boys. Then we're going to have Boss Nikrot. So Boss Nikrot's going to do a lot of good stuff for us. He's going to be able to get us just a little bit of extra forward pressure. He's going to stop us from getting move blocked, which is a problem for Green Tide. He is a really interesting tech piece that I like a lot, and I'm going to just run Boss Nikrot because I think his utility is unparalleled. Then we're going to have 6 squads of 20 boys. I'm going to keep them all with choppas. I might have 2 rocket launchers in all of them, but the rest of them are all going to be choppas. Obviously, Power Claw on the knob, because that is the bread and butter of the list. These dudes, they get to the objective as quickly as possible. You try to keep as many in cover as you can, but you understand that you're going to get killed. It is A-okay. You recognize that, and you're just going to be resurrecting your boys as you go along. Remember, those pain boys, by the way, each once per game get to resurrect an additional D3 models. And the models that you resurrect, remember, that can be your knob. So sometimes if you don't want to lose all your boys, you can take 2 wounds on the knob, because a knob has 2 wounds, and then the pain boy can resurrect that. So it's like, it's really kind of an interesting thing that we can do. We're going to have 3 units of Gretchen, 2 units of Storm Boys, just to get places, kiss babies, shake hands, you know what I mean? And then lastly, I'm going to drop in 2 custom Booster Blasters to be handing out that sweet, sweet -1 to hit buff, which is going to really, really add up over a while. So this is the list I'm starting with. I think it is a rock star. Give it a whirl on your own. I want to see you guys run it. I want to hear your thoughts about how it does for you. I believe this was 1990. Let me check on my build. Yes, 1990. There's a few tweaks that I might want to consider. Like, for example, I might want to run the Mega Knob unit in it. But I think initially running the Mega Knobs really just takes away from what this list does really good. And I'm a powerful advocate for leaning into your strengths, not trying to shore up weaknesses in list building. So that is it, my Grots and Gets. This is Green Tide. This is how we're going to run it. These are the combinations that we're really, really going to be looking for. And this is how we're going to be annihilating people. Big key takeaways. Make sure you pay attention to when you get to do your Blood Surge, for lack of a better term, your 1 CP stratagem that allows you to move after getting shot. Because if you can get in engagement range, you can stop an opponent from charging, which in certain matchups is a really big deal. Because like if you're playing World Eaters, you can stop them from getting the +1 attack, +1 strength. Same thing for Blood Angels. It can also stop you from being shot by other units. It's very, very powerful. It can also allow you to steal objectives from your opponent. Like, it is very, very powerful. So really, really make sure you look out for that. Set up these teleport strikes, because even if you fail the strike, you're still move blocking. And if they do shoot you, you're going to end up engagement, stopping all of their movements. There's a lot of power in this detachment, even though I don't think I enjoy playing it. I think a lot of you are going to have a blast with it, and I'm really excited to coach you all through it and help you maximize your fun and your playing potential with Warhammer. So until next time, my beautiful Grots and Gets, this was Green Tide. Hit the like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, yell at me, tell me if you think I'm dumb, and we will see you on the next one. Cheers.